Hey, what's up everyone in property management land? Today's topic for this video is you are the expert. And I think that's important for us to remind ourselves of commonly, because we're always being second guessed by owners, by tenants, by vendors, by homeowner associations, and worst of all, ourselves. I went to a presentation a few years back by a great property manager out of Austin, Texas. His name is Steve Crossland. And a lot of kind of the philosophy of how I run my company, I've modeled on a lot of pointers I've gotten from him. And in this presentation, he brought up the fact that most property managers, we act as a fiduciary. The management contract that we have with the owner establishes a fiduciary relationship. And that means that the owners are delegating a substantial amount of authority to us as licensed professionals, yet day by day, property managers go to work acting as though they're personal assistants. And I think specifically what he said was, don't forget the fact that you are the experienced, highly trained, and licensed professional, where an owner is really an inexperienced amateur. And of course, there's exceptions to that. You'll have some owners that maybe have a lot of experience. They've managed, multiple properties over many years. Some of them may have done it themselves during that time and now are choosing to outsource management. But oftentimes, in the single-family space especially, your landlord clients probably own the one property. It used to be their primary residence, and now they've decided to rent it, and they came to you because they just don't know what they're doing. So in that case, why would you ask them how to manage your property? It would be, it's kind of a silly example, I guess, but it would be similar to you needing quadruple bypass surgery and walking into a consultation with, one of the esteemed, highly rated cardiac surgeons in your area, and you sitting down and telling them, hey doctor, this is how this procedure is going to go. I want you to use a number 10 blade scalpel, and the anesthesiologist, I'm going to need him to run by me what kind of anesthesia techniques he's going to use, because I might want to override those. And the surgery, I know you say it's an 8-hour procedure, but I expect you to get it done in 4 hours and charge me half as much. That doctor would just kick you out of their office, and of course, it makes sense that all the responsibility for your life is in their hands. So if you die because they're following your direction, they're the ones liable for it. And as a property manager, we are liable for a lot of stuff that goes on with the property. And even if we're not ultimately liable, we certainly are perceived to be responsible, which results in bad reviews and real estate commission complaints and everything else. So you've got to keep control of the best practices that are followed when managing properties if you're going to decide to sign it up. And I say when you decide, because when you sign that management agreement, even if the owners are wrong, you're taking responsibility for those wrong decisions. So at the time of you're pitching your service to them, that's the best chance to set those expectations. Those owners don't really know what they're doing anyway, so whatever you tell them is probably what they're going to be in agreement with. So here's some examples of acting like a personal assistant and not a property manager. When you have an owner that says, hey, every application that you get from a prospective tenant, I require that I review them first, and I get the final say on who you approve to live in my property. Or if they say, hey, I've got my own special lease agreement. I know you have a lease agreement that works perfectly for your company, and it integrates my property into your system, but I want to throw a wrench in that plan, and you're going to have to use my lease agreement or my special provisions that I have. Every owner thinks their property is unique, right? But we all know for the most part they're not. Every property can be covered by your good general lease agreement that's attorney approved. So that's an example. Another one would be owners who expect that you're going to let them accompany you on routine inspections. Or owners that say, hey, I want to do my own repairs, or I've got specific handymen or HVAC vendors or plumbers that know my property, because once again, my property is very unique and I need these vendors to be used, not your generally approved vendors. Another big one, emergency maintenance, where your hands are cuffed. Now, you've got a tenant with no heat, but you haven't properly set the expectation that in emergencies you have ultimate authority to remedy that situation. And if you think about it, if you got a tenant freezing in a property, it's not as urgent for the owner because they're in their house with heat. They're comfy. The only thing that is creating discomfort for them is having to spend money. So they're, of course, going to want to ease that comfort as much as possible, and they're going to say, well, I need you to get 3 estimates. Well, you've got a vendor on site that could fix the problem right now for $700, but that's above your spending authorization, and you didn't list in your management agreement that you have ultimate authority in emergencies. So now you're out there having to get estimates. And in that case, the tenant's cold, they're freezing, and who's to blame? It's you. And rightfully so, because you're not acting like a licensed professional. You're acting like an amateur who's been hired by an owner as their personal assistant to be at their beck and call and do their bidding. So, when it comes down to it, you've got to remember, you're the professional. You need to have a list of no option repairs. That's what Steve calls them in the management agreement. Furnace when there's no heat, water heaters going out, electrical problems that could cause fires to the property, uncontrolled flooding, air conditioning, and when it's triple-digit heat outside. I mean, even if it's not a habitability requirement by law, out in Colorado, as an example, lack of AC is not a habitability requirement, but I can tell you when it's 105 degrees outside and the tenant's cooking in their house with their newborn child, it's an emergency. So when you have an owner that doesn't want to fix that, or they want to delay it, and you haven't classified that as an emergency situation, you don't even have the law to fall back on and say, well, the law says it's an emergency. So you've got to protect yourself in those situations, and you've got to ensure that your management agreement gives you the authority that a fiduciary absolutely should have. And if they don't like that, then they really should probably look for another property manager who is inexperienced, or someone that they could just hire on salary and make them their own personal assistant, and then they can direct their efforts. Of course, the personal assistant's going to run them $40,000 to $50,000 a year, where your management commission's only around $3,000 to $4,000 a year. So they have to decide how important it is for them to be able to direct the efforts. It's that whole have their cake and eat it too. They're getting a substantial discount on outsourced management, yet they're expecting you to work for them 20 to 30 hours a week, following their direction. So, look, you know that how you want to manage your property is in their best interests. Okay, and I've used this example a couple times, I think, in previous videos. Children wouldn't tell their parents how to parent. I mean, children have parents for a reason, because they don't have the maturity to make certain decisions. And a lot of owners, when it comes to managing their properties, they're like children. They don't understand why certain things need to operate a certain way. They don't understand the laws that we're having to deal with. Many practices that we follow are counterintuitive. And so that's where they are relying to you. They came to you to manage their property. So as long as they choose to be with you, act like the professional and manage their property. If they don't like the way you're managing it, they have the option to part ways with you and go find someone else. But if they're deciding to be with you and you're deciding to manage their property, you should be managing it the way that you know is best for them. And even if you lose that account, at least you can go to sleep at night knowing that you were acting in their best interest. If a teenager is mad at their parents and they're not talking to their parent, it doesn't matter. You know you're doing what's best for them. Eventually they're going to come back around. And the same thing with your owners. And if they don't come around, it's all right. Sign up another owner that is more in line with your philosophy, and is going to ensure that your reputation is kept intact, and ultimately that you're doing what's right for the tenants as well, without violating your fiduciary. This guy almost ran into me. But the tenants are human. We should be treating them as such, and that is good business for the owner. A happy tenant pays their rent on time. They renew their lease. They take care of the property. Ultimately, all that goes straight to the owner's bottom line. So just keep that in mind when you're managing your properties. You are the expert. You're the licensed professional. If you're in a state that doesn't require licensing, you're still the professional. Join NARPM if you haven't already done so. NARPM's a phenomenal organization. Stands for National Association of Residential Property Managers. There's probably a local chapter in your area if you're in any decently sized metro area. And if there's not, there's probably one within reasonable driving distance. But they do a lot of continuing education. They do a lot of great monthly luncheons with great speakers, like Steve Crossland came to one of our luncheons in Denver and spoke. So join these organizations. IREM realtor associations usually are more targeted towards sales, but sometimes they offer a property management course or two. And definitely, meet up with property managers in the area. Go have lunch. We're on this business together, so even though we're competing, we're in the trenches. So go have lunch, trade war stories, get ideas, have a resource of someone who you can call when you do need some advice or just some reassurance after you've had a bad day of getting yelled and screamed at. Just remember, you're the licensed professional, and get a buddy who can remind you of that as well. All right, so take care. Go out there and crush it. Hey, hope this last video on you being the expert was helpful to you. If you could, go ahead and click that little thumbs up button down there in YouTube. That helps YouTube know that the content that I'm putting out is valuable to you and that you think it's good. If you don't like it, then go find someone else. There's a lot of other great people out there that do property management content as well. But if you like mine, I really appreciate that thumbs up. That's really the only thing I ask of people to do. I don't charge for any of these videos. If you're not on YouTube, if you're listening to this on like a podcast, what you're listening to is actually on YouTube. So if you don't mind going